Welcome, everyone. Uh, it's great to be with you here today as we get underway on our panel discussion on constructing carbon-free buildings. This is the fourth and final in a series of discussions on what it will take to build the path to 2050 and carbon-free buildings. My name is Fernando Arias, and I'm delighted to moderate today's discussion as Clark's Director of Sustainability. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Building Innovation Hub team and the Clark Construction team who went through a very productive partnership and who have consistently delivered exemplary work in leading our industry forward through a wide array of stakeholder perspectives on carbon neutral or carbon-free buildings. But I'd also like to present to you my co-host for today's session, Teresa Backus, who is the Associate Director at the Building Innovation Hub and who will share her perspectives as we close out on this landmark series. Teresa, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Fernando. Hi, everybody. Welcome on behalf of the Building Innovation Hub. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and a big thank you to Fernando and to Clark Construction for their partnership throughout this entire series. They've put in a lot of work. We've had a lot of great discussions and behind the scenes effort that has gone into all of these panels, and we're really excited to have so many people returning to us or to join us here on our fourth and final panel. And I really can't believe we're at our grand finale already. It's pretty incredible to see everybody here. So for those of you who've attended in the past panels, you've heard me say this before, but the conversation we're going to have today is coming at a critical juncture in time. And for those who are just joining us today, I wanted to spend a couple minutes giving you some background about the hub and why we're having this conversation. And you probably know that buildings account for a very large portion of global carbon emissions, and specifically in the District of Columbia, where the hub is based, it's over 70%. So of global emissions, or of carbon emissions, I should say, in the city. So we really must reduce building-related emissions in order to achieve these collective climate goals. The hub was created with support from the district's Department of Energy and the Environment, and also our founding members to help us realize our goals through a few key actions. First, we were created to connect members of the building community and create a place to foster important conversations around how subsections of our industry can work together. Secondly, a big goal of ours is to make high-performing buildings the new normal, to really make low-carbon buildings business as usual. And finally, another big goal of ours is to help people realize the many benefits of high-performing buildings beyond energy efficiency and beyond regulatory compliance. So as I'm sure you've experienced, our industry can be pretty segmented at times. We are focused on connecting disciplines to help you understand how to interact with one another in order to create these best-in-class buildings. And really, our name comes from the fact that we act as a hub of information to offer this full suite of resources and events like the one today to bring leaders together. So we have a great opportunity. I'm really excited to see what this last conversation brings to the surface, and I'm excited to get started. Let's get to work.
Yeah, I feel like I'm already going to miss talking to you, Teresa, on weekly basis at this point. But yes, so agree. All the hard work that went into putting our program together. So I want to thank you, Teresa. I think all of your remarks today are establishing a very important overview and context for our session today. So now pivoting to discussing our format for today. And so for the audience, please expect about 45 minutes or more of discussion where I will moderate our panel and guide us through our conversation about what it will take to construct carbon-free buildings. And thereafter, about 20 minutes or so of Q&A will follow. So feel free to type into the chat any questions during the discussion that might emerge. My team will forward those questions to me so our panelists can respond at the Q&A segment. So with that, I'd like to present to you our selected panel, my esteemed industry colleagues. Awesome. Excellent. So would love for you to meet Christy Gamble, who will tell you about herself and what she does, plus one fun fact. And all of the speakers will follow as I call their name. So, Christy, over to you.
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. And first of all, thank you, Fernando, for having me on the panel today. My name is Christy Gamble. I am the Sustainability Senior Director with Carbonfree Technologies. I am based out of Regina, Saskatchewan, where first fun fact, I'm going to give two. The first fun fact is that it is a blizzard today. So lucky me, I'm joining you in the middle of a blizzard. So really jealous of anyone who's, perhaps joining us today from Southern California or just somewhere much nicer than here. Carbonfree is a Canadian clean technology company that is on a global mission to reduce the carbon footprint of the concrete industry. So we're working with concrete providers across the globe and really excited to talk to you about that throughout the panel today. My other fun fact is that as a Canadian who is stuck in blizzards, I also participate in many Canadian activities, including curling. And I just recently gave my best shot at representing Canada at the Olympics. I was part of the Olympic trials process, but unfortunately lost out recently. So no Olympics for me.
Oh man, wow. Well, that's an interesting background for sure, Christy, and I love talking to you about all that winter sports stuff. So good to have you on our panel. Julia, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody, and Fernando, thank you. This is going to be a really fun group from the prep calls at least. I think we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. I am Julia Geiswhite, Turner Construction's Chief Sustainability Officer, and I am so excited about the timing of this panel. Like Teresa said, we are working on all things decarbonization, but particularly of the building materials that go into Turner buildings, as well as the operations that happen on Turner site. So this is a great collaboration amongst this group, but also really excited to hear what you guys have to say in the chat. My two fun facts, since Christy got two, I'm going to steal two. One is that I have an addiction to crossword puzzles. I do at least 2 a day, as well as a very strong addiction to late night QVC and HSN. I don't buy a lot. I just love the infomercials. And my other fun fact is that I very, very strongly dislike bacon. And people all are like all aghast when I say that. I know. I saw all your eyes go wide. So those are my two fun facts.
Wow. Well, good to know. I definitely will not be inviting you to any Appalachian, milkshakes or anything. Will not add any bacon to those. Over to you, Lucas.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Fernando. My name is Lucas Hamilton. I'm the manager of Applied Building Sciences for Saint-Gobain North America. Saint-Gobain is one of the world's largest manufacturers of construction materials. We are a global manufacturer of construction materials, which kind of gives us a unique outlook with regards to the issues that we're talking about today. I don't have two fun facts. I'm just not that fun a person, I guess. My only fun fact I could come up with is that I have been within 40 miles of the North Pole. A temporary moment where you can be impressed, but the fact was there's an airplane flying from New York City to Beijing, so it wasn't that difficult, but everyone did open their windows and look when the pilot made it.
That's cool. Although I will do a little plug for you and say that it might not be a fun fact, it's an impressive fact that you are a physicist that works in the built environment and really undertakes some of this work from the perspective of physical sciences as well as building sciences. So I'm really excited to have you in the group, Lucas. And then last but not least, an excellent new colleague, Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to be part of this today. Looking forward to it. Julia, I liked you before you told me you didn't like bacon. How can anyone not like bacon? I am the logistics officer at Miller & Long. Miller & Long has been around in the DC market and the surrounding areas for more than 70 years. We are a concrete subcontractor. And in my role, I lead most of the operations for our yard. So all of the logistics that flows out of our yard in the Maryland, Upper Marlboro, Maryland area, mobile cranes, tower cranes, concrete batch plants, concrete procurement, things like shotcrete. So excited to be part of this today as a result of my role there. I don't have two fun facts either. I'm not sure what my fun fact is a fun fact, but and Christy, I can't pretend to even think about what it would take to be part of an Olympic trial. But I've run 3 full marathons and I've run 4 half marathons. So my knees are telling me now that wasn't a good idea, but fun fact nonetheless.
Wow. What a warrior, man. I didn't had no idea that you're such an endurance runner, so good to know. Good.
In a few years, but I did them. That's all I could say.
That's great. Well, listen, I hope that all of our attendees now have a little bit more of familiarity with our speakers today. And with that, I'd like to take now the next step, which is really to guide us through the discussion of understanding how to construct or build carbon-free or carbon-neutral buildings. I know that there's a variety of terminology out there in the market, but we're really talking about how do we make the construction process as well as all of the other aspects of this decarbonization wedge work collectively and collaboratively together. So we're going to start with a round of discussion where I'll call on the different speakers and allow them to share with you their perspectives around what the key opportunities are, what might be some of the key challenges, and ultimately what kinds of jobs or retraining or skills do we need in order to execute and achieve some of these recommendations or these points of views. So let's get started with talking about opportunities, and I'm going to invite Christy to get us started. Christy, over to you. Opportunities for carbon-free buildings. What do you think?
Well, there's so much that we could talk about when it comes to carbon-free buildings. And a lot of the conversation that has happened to date has been around operational carbon. So how do we take our buildings and make for more efficient heating and cooling systems, reduce the energy consumption, the heating and energy that comes from the operations, the lighting, etc. Comparatively, very little conversation and innovation has occurred around the concept of embodied carbon. So embodied carbon is the carbon footprint of a building before the lights are turned on for the first time. It's the carbon footprint that comes from the building materials, the construction of the building itself. And it's becoming a much bigger part of the overall carbon footprint of buildings as our buildings become more operationally efficient. And so it's really time to start focusing on this conversation. What we do know is that over the next 40 years, as we're building a lot of construction across the globe, in fact, I've heard it's about a New York City every month across the globe, embodied carbon is expected to account for about 50% of that overall carbon footprint of that construction in that time period. So that's a really significant number. And to me, that represents an opportunity. If we want to start to really think about net zero carbon buildings, we need to look at reducing embodied carbon significantly and immediately. So within that, where do we start? We can start by taking a look at construction practices, as well as some of the main contributors to embodied carbon, the big building materials such as concrete, wood, and steel. I focus particularly on concrete and working with concrete industry partners, including Jim over at Miller & Lawn. So to me, that's where there's so much opportunity to really look at the way that concrete and other building materials are being built, or being specified, or being procured. And from what I've seen, there's a lot of innovation and a lot of status quo to knock down. A lot of things that are being done the way they have been doing, being built the way that they've always been built. And I think we really need to look at how we're specifying, procuring concrete, other building materials, and just think about embodied carbon as a whole. So that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
That's true. Yeah, and Christy, I think I remember your comments in earlier conversations and prep for today, where we were really thinking about, ensuring that we capture whatever carbon we can in the process of construction, because we cannot reduce or get back the carbon, once it's been emitted, right? So there's a lot of work that we can do to abate that. Over to you, Julia. What do you have, in the world of opportunities? What do you consider?
Yeah, well, I second Christy on the embodied carbon opportunities. And I would say, depending on how you define embodied carbon and where the boundaries of kind of embodied carbon stop, I think the procurement and how contractors like Turner work with subcontractors is a real opportunity as well. And so because there are things, I think as contractors, there are a lot of design decisions that are not necessarily in our control, but there are decisions in the way that we build the work and buy the work and collaborate with our subcontractors that really have an influence on the embodied carbon. So material selection is one of them, and that's the biggest one. But the way we operate our job sites, the way the erection of the building goes up, all can play a part. I mean, there are things that never make it to the spec book. These are things like how material gets to the job site, how many trips, how many deliveries does it take, can we prefab or not, how are we moving materials around the job sites, what kind of equipment are we using to move the materials around. We have all of these opportunities to make better decisions and more sustainable decisions that are just means and methods and have nothing to do with what's drawn on paper and what's drawn in the drawing. So I think there's sometimes it's an easy cop out to say that as contractors we can't influence design decisions, but I think we play a really interesting role as kind of like the node between the subcontractors and a whole tier and sub-tier system of suppliers that can really help move the needle. And then how we can collaborate with clients and bring those ideas and those solutions to the table.
Yes, Julia, and I also, resonate and agree that as general contractors, within our operational domain, there's a variety of choices that we can make to make the process more efficient, more effective. And, whether it's changing our fuels and looking at the way that we're, energizing, empowering projects, all the way to thinking about how to, conduct efficiency on the actual job site. Those are all things that we also think about too. So now pivoting over to Lucas. Lucas, thinking through opportunities for carbon-free buildings, what are you thinking?
Well, from the manufacturer's perspective, the people who make the parts, there is a lot of opportunity on our end for things that we can do. Starting off with just today with the information that's available in the form of LCAs and places that we can make smart choices about the materials that we are choosing, that Turner is choosing to put together the assemblies, that Clark is choosing to put together the assemblies. So there's good data out there to start right away that you can make smarter decisions. With that same data, we as manufacturers now can go back and have sustainable manufacturing procedures. We can do periodic and regular evaluations of what we're doing and how we're doing it and looking at carbon as an issue and start making decisions pulling on those levers as opposed to say something simply like price or things like that. So we can put carbon into that part of the discussion of sustainable product design and continuous improvement as it occurs to us there. Another tremendous opportunity exists today in the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. As it's known. We have a chance today to bring technologies into our manufacturing processes, again, with carbon in mind, that help us get efficiencies and remove some of the inefficiencies that exist that are causing us to have a greater carbon debit than we should be having for the materials that we are making. That's really a big one that we've yet to see the full, where it will go and what's possible, but it's tremendously exciting because of the ability to bring technology now onto older factory floors and things like that. And along those same lines, if we then take that to our customers and say, offsite construction is a very interesting opportunity with regards to reducing some of the waste, because waste is energy we're throwing away. Some of the manufacturing waste that we're doing in regards to the sizing of materials and things like that are being cut in the field that we've seen with some offsite construction. We've been able to eliminate some of that by changing the sizes that we're making to meet the factory floor requirements and reduce some waste that way, as well as the efficiencies that can occur on the factory floor with again, a chance to get rid of some of the energy that we're putting into what we're doing. So on the manufacturing end is ripe with opportunities everywhere we look. A lot of it starts with information and communication and language and common vocabulary on these issues and working all the way down the supply chain, because our suppliers are scope 2 and scope 3. And that's some of the big challenges, the scope 3 that we all look at. We go, oh my gosh. So we need to start pushing the discussion in that direction to make sure that everyone is coming with us with the information that we need to make the right decision.
Yeah, I agree, Lucas. And I think, especially when you started to comment about the, supply chain, I think that there's a terrific, abundant opportunities here, especially as the economy is really gearing up. With the signing of these various infrastructure bills and Build Back Better America bills, all of these other policies that are currently underway in Congress, and one of them just got signed into law this week, to propagate more local manufacturing, right? One of the ways in which we can help to reduce the embodied carbon of all kinds of materials is to shorten those travel distances, those transportation distances, and make things more locally available to propagate, local economies. So I think that those were the thoughts that we also shared together earlier. And I see that as a complete set of ideas for the manufacturing side. Now, pivoting over to you, Jim, what might be your thoughts here related to opportunities to do more carbon-free buildings.
I'm going to try to pull bits and pieces of the three prior comments because they're all very, very worthwhile. And I want to talk about everybody's favorite product, concrete. But Christy hinted at, CarbonCure's involvement for the concrete process, the production of concrete process, and how those two keywords, embodied carbon, they're everyone's favorite buzzword today, and it's absolutely relevant and necessary. Carbon capture is a key component to reducing the embodied carbon, but I think we have enough technology out there available to us today to create a product that has significantly less embodied carbon by looking at slightly different materials. We still need cement, and cement contributes, I think, 7% of the world's CO2, carbon dioxide, which is significant for one product. However, so if we can reduce and still create a cementitious bond that we're looking for in concrete by looking at recycled materials, we're doing some proprietary blends right now and having great success with them, utilizing those other materials and the technology and the testing that goes behind them, all while using local materials so the travel time is less and you're contributing less carbon to the world, to the environment. That's a better thing for us to do. And Julia had mentioned travel time, so transportation is key. For us, if we have to have a concrete truck on the road for 30 or 40 minutes, not only is it challenging because of traffic to get to the site and less efficient and we're not being as productive, but we're also burning a significant amount of fuel. In that process and the processes with producing concrete, we burn a lot of diesel fuel or use a lot of energy, and we have to be smarter in how we produce the products that we're utilizing, not just concrete. So in Europe, I know they're utilizing hybrid mixer trucks right now. So those types of things are all great opportunities for us, and we can't look at just one single aspect. We have to look at the compilation of those aspects to see if we can create, that embodied carbon reduction that's significant enough for us to achieve net zero ultimately.
Yeah. And Jim, I think, to your extending your thoughts a little further, I think what we're really hearing from the speakers, as well as, diving into this topic more specifically, there's a variety of steps along the way prior to the building being turned over and occupied by its, whoever tenants or owners might be. And so as we think about both the energy supply to the processes and the adaptive use of some of those building components for either existing buildings or new construction, there's a variety of ways in which opportunities to differentiate ourselves and create competitive advantages with these services can really help to move the market in the direction of abundant procurement and supply of some of these services and materials, which will really go a long way to establish the decarbonization profiles that we want for the built environment. So let's continue to talk through on those items. Now, pivoting over, that all sounds like blue sky, but we know it takes a lot of work to get there. And really now it's an opportunity to kind of discuss more what the challenges are to accomplishing some of these blue sky goals. And so I'm going to go in reverse order now, and I'm going to call on Jim. And Jim, would you lead us through, giving some form here to what do we think are some of the challenges to building carbon-free buildings?
Certainly. There are two things that come to the top of my mind on the challenge front. Measurable change takes time, and change of any kind is always met with some level of resistance, usually a great measure of resistance, because we're uncomfortable as human beings to get out of our comfort zone. So when we talk about making change, either via the transportation of products to the job, using different materials, things that we're unfamiliar with, that is challenging, and it's hard to implement that change. So that's one aspect here. The second would be citing back to what I mentioned on utilizing recycled materials, using different products, things that are, an embodied carbon benefit that will help reduce our embodied carbon footprint. That comes with a cost, and there is a significant cost challenge when you either enter a more difficult and challenging manufacturing process utilizing a fuel or an energy that is, takes more energy or takes more cost, is more costly to produce. That cost creates a challenge for us as well. Now, are there ways to overcome that? Absolutely. There are tax credits that we can pursue. We can lean on the federal government on, some of those costs to help us over the hump on a new process. And those are things we're pursuing. I think they're exciting. They're challenging, yes, but there's hurdles we can overcome.
I agree. Yep. Over to you, Lucas. Thoughts on challenges?
Two of the biggest challenges that we face are, one is the electrification of industrial process. If we are going to become reducing our footprint, we need to change the fuels we're using. And unfortunately, with regard to some processes, electricity is not as efficient. Say a drying oven, for example, if you think about gypsum boards go through these mile-long tunnels of drying ovens to complete the calcine process. There's no good way to make hot air with electricity today. And so we're still burning fossil fuels to make hot air to dry those boards. That's the sort of thing that we have a big challenge with. It. We can switch over some processes, like arc furnaces. We can have electric arc furnace to make glass versus a gas furnace, and we do. And we're switching over those things right now. As a matter of fact, we just announced a $400 million investment just in the Southeast to start changing over these industrial processes, and that will reduce 20% of our carbon footprint related to what we're doing just in energy, and about 50% of our waste, because again, we're looking at the waste because the waste is energy going by us. But that's the kind of investment it takes to move off of some of the fossil fuels that we're already on. And again, we need improvements in the efficiencies of some of those technologies to help us electrify more easily, because sometimes we can switch over today, but it's like, running your gypsum boards through a Betty Crocker oven is not going to be a very good way to dry them. And so we need that to improve dramatically. Another thing that we need to get better control over or handle on is bringing materials back to us. We have a really hard time getting post-consumer recycled materials that we can use. Glass, as an example, is one of the more recycled materials in America, but we still can't get enough. No one who uses glass and glass furnaces can get enough glass back from the marketplace today. If they're away from economies where there's deposit on the bottle, it disappears. When there's deposit on the bottle, it all comes around, but without that, it's gone. And so we run out there. And so we're always looking for new ways to try to bring those materials back to us. And so there's provocative things that people talk about today, like, what if we leased you pieces for your building? So we would get them back when you were done. And it's our problem to come make sure we get them back. We actually want that problem. It would be a great way for us to solve a whole bunch of different issues in terms of bringing materials back into our system and creating a more of a circular economy with these materials and trying to wipe out that carbon penalty that we're getting from that. So those are kind of the two big things that we hit on right out of the gate. Really poor electrification potentials in some of the industrial processes we have today. We need to flip that. We need to get better, and we need to get some of those materials we've already paid for back so we can do it again.
Well, I definitely will be remembering this about recycled glass, Lucas. I had no idea that, Saint-Gobain has such a robust take-back program, but certainly it's a leader in that example. So thank you for saying that today. Julia, over to you. When you think about challenges, what are some of the thoughts that emerge?
Yeah, well, I love that out-of-the-box thinking, Lucas, for circularity, because we are, honestly, as an industry, we lack so much innovation. We like to think we're an innovative industry, and then we do stuff with data capture and that, but we really don't. As an industry, we are consistently ranked the lowest of industries in terms of investment in technology. So at one side of our mouths, we complain that we're not scaling up technology enough, but we're not really investing in technology at the rate we should. So it's, we kind of got to put our money where our mouth is there. But I think another opportunity is just collaborating more peer to peer. Let's not call it, I heard once, one of my colleagues refer to it as, think of the term, but basically not referring to, Turner not referring to Clark as a competitor. In sustainability, we have to be peers. And before my current role, I spent some time in sales and business development. And when you're in sales, you hold everything very close to the vest, right? You don't want your best secrets out there and your strategies out there for others to pick at. But when it comes to decarbonizing, we all have to share all the good that we can. I mean, we have to spread it, tell others what works, tell others what doesn't work, because we don't have time for every company to recreate and relearn over and over. We have to do a better job. We have to remember that we're all working towards the same goal. So however we can all have more of these conversations, how we can reach across lines and shake hands and aisles that we may not have crossed in another context, we have to continue to do that and have conversations in organizations and groups. Within my team, we're having conversations with mechanical engineers, with structural engineers, and we were never having these intimate conversations about what goes into concrete mixes, before. It was let's bid it out and buy it, and it's low bid wins. And Jim, to your point, there definitely cost is still an obstacle. But I'll tell you, I'm having less conversations about what's the cost of it than I have in the past. So it's headed in the right direction in that way, but it's still a real barrier.
Yes, and Julia, I think when you bring up the role of the contractor, and especially in our space of sustainability, being more collaborators, I think what's important to impress upon the attendees and certainly industry-wide is that as we collaborate, what we're really helping to do is accelerate the learning curve in the labor market. The labor market is so stressed as it is that we all collectively benefit by more competent and more productive trades, especially when we think about the intensive, energy-intensive trades. So that's something that I wanted to make sure, I shared with you and the rest of the group here. And I also liked how you brought up, Julia, technology, because I think also I want to unpack that one. When we think about technology, many of us immediately think apps, and that's an important aspect of technology, digital technology. But we're also thinking here, we have to have mechanical technology as a component of innovation. So we might touch on those themes later when we get to the jobs or what kind of skills we might need. But I wanted to sort of establish that here as well, that, an integral aspect of solving for challenges is thinking about people and technology from these kind of diverse points of view. So Christy, over to you as the final thoughts on challenges that you might see for building carbon-free buildings.
I'll start with what I don't think the challenge is. I don't think the challenge is technology. I think technology and innovation is something that we are capable of collectively. We've seen so much progress in the space over the past couple of decades and even couple of years, and it's been accelerated, that I have complete faith that technologically speaking, we're going to have all of the options available to build carbon-free buildings. To me, the challenge is human behavior. How do you create change? How do you get people talking together that need to talk together, as Julia said? Looking at Lucas's example, and thinking about the amount of glass that is probably not getting recycled, that should be recycled, that's so obvious. And yet, how do you get human behavior to change so that glass is just automatically recycled? So in the context of specifically some of the experiences that I've had introducing a new technology, a new innovation into concrete, and then working with structural engineers and contractors, and particularly government organizations that are procuring concrete. And we have to get approvals. We have to get, the kind of cooperation, collaboration from the right people in the project to, first of all, be open-minded to pursuing it, and then to perhaps do some things that might be a little bit of a change from the way things were done before. In concrete, for example, concrete specifications have been written the same way for decades. And many organizations are looking at these concrete specs and making some changes to make sure that they're less prescriptive or less prohibiting of innovation. But it's not, the most fun of, things to do. And it's a tough behavior to change, is how a designer, for example, is going to design concrete, specify, procure concrete. There's risk involved in that. So to me, that's the biggest challenge, is how do you really get all of the people who need to be at the table talking together? And building off of Julia's comment earlier on that collaboration, and I'm actually going to steal something that I heard from one of your colleagues earlier today, Julia. She used the word coopetition, which is the concept that when it comes to, historically, competition, you try to keep your secret safe. You try to be better than your competitors. But there are certain things where you shouldn't be secretive or proprietary about. If we're talking about worker safety, for example, Safety is something that if there are best practices that are discovered, they should be shared across the industry. It is best for everybody that way. And sustainability is one of them. And so that's where I thought it was really interesting. I discovered earlier today, just a firsthand approach, how Turner was working on co-opetition and trying to share sustainability practices with other general contractors, because it has to happen if we're going to get the industry to change.
Well, I can't wait to see that as a hashtag, Julia. That's something that I can't wait to hear a lot more about. Christy, I also remember, not that I want to belabor the point, but I had written down here that, one of the challenges that I also think about, and I believe you share this point of view with me, is time. We don't really have a lot of time to do, more risk adverse type of, piloting or testing. I think, we have to move past traditional due diligence on innovations. And, we also can't really wait for government incentives or rebates to, propagate a lot of research and development in this space. And so I think right now we rely on the cutting edge leaders in the industry, both on the private, institutional, and public side, to begin to sort of invest in some of these choices, and that moves the market by becoming more aware of the varieties of ways in which we can procure materials, establish processes, et cetera, et cetera. And some interesting questions are already coming in on the chat related to some of this, so I'll save some of those for a little bit later. But now I'm going to pivot us to talk about what kind of solutions and types of jobs or retraining or skills do we need in order to actually, execute on some of these ideas. And for this round, I'm going to go in a random order, and I'm going to call on my friend Lucas. Lucas, if you could perhaps move us on in the direction of exploring jobs, training, or skills that we need in order to make sure that we accomplish these goals.
What we need on our end is manufacturing engineers and master mechanics. It sounds like we shouldn't be needing that today, but we do. We're still in factories that have smart and mechanical aspects to them, as Fernando pointed out to earlier. And there's a gap in what's going on. We have some really great people that can come in and handle on the smart end of the thing, and we're losing all of our master mechanics on the other end of the process. And so that the process doesn't always work as well as it needs to. And the industrial processes need constant oversight and constant tweaking and constant fixing to keep them at their maximum efficiencies to reduce waste again, waste of energy, or material. And so I looked online. We have over 150 openings right now in our plants here in North America for manufacturing engineers. We haven't even gone into the mechanics yet. And so there's still a real need for engineers who are willing to go mechanical engineering, get in the factory, and start working with these incredibly complex and difficult processes that are going on today, and they're not bound to become more simple. Unfortunately, they're bound to become more complex, and so we still have a great need for people there. And I'm also going to suggest that we still need people that can operate this building and refurbish and refresh and own this building in an intelligent manner. That we can't just hand over these beautiful, brilliant buildings to people who don't understand what they're getting into, because we see people that when drywall gets damaged, they're just buying whatever they can buy. When people are just grabbing whatever they can grab to keep moving, and we can't keep doing that going forward because we are dumbing down our machines every year unless we are educating the owners and the operators on everything that's going on with regards to sustainability or the performance of those buildings. And so I still see a disconnect going there in everyday life in the operation of these buildings that we're making.
Yeah, well, Lucas, as you well know, from my days in the military or as a tank mechanic, I definitely have great respect for anybody who would be able to earn the title of master mechanic. But, we will need folks that have that mechanical systems mindset in order to solve some of these more analog type problems with a complement to digital technology, right? Because, variety of sensors or gears or components of machines which enable us to both fabricate, transport, and install product that is all good and decarbonized as it is, because it's perhaps using high recycled content and less virgin materials. All of that still needs people who can practically resolve mechanical failures or damages or inefficiencies, right? So I think that that's a really actually great idea and an important one for me to highlight. I want to put it over to Julia as well. Julia, over to you. When we think about jobs or skills or training, what are some of the ideas that come to you?
Yeah, I think I saw one of your other three panels that someone said, we need more sustainability directors. And I think, yeah, if we're going to see change here in this space at the pace we need it, we need people that are doing sustainability as part of their day job, as their full-time day job, not after hours, after they've, come off the project site and they're tired and it's something else they have to do. And, we have to invest in this as a priority and have folks working on very specific targeted topics. Like I just saw Heinz put someone in the chair of chief carbon officer. I mean, that's a very dedicated role. And I think Owens Corning hired someone as their circular economy leader, that are really, dedicated to advancing these topics. We had a Turner event last week, the week before. We had Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson come and present to us. And if you guys don't know Dr. Johnson, she's fantastic. Google her, I'll put her in the chat. She does a podcast called How to Save the Planet. And she said, what I like to challenge people on, or, I like to say, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. And so when we look at things, the way we fund sustainability at a company like Turner, Turner is a $12 billion company. And we just now have 9 or 10 people doing sustainability full time. But as I talk to my, as I talk to our peers and others in the industry that I would argue are very equally large firms, they're clawing for people, they're begging for people to help do this really, really important work. So I think we have to put more people in these roles, and with the exponential growth that we're seeing in ESG, it's really getting harder and harder to argue that the ROI is, because I think we have a lot of clients at least asking for what our efforts and our initiatives are around sustainability and the environment. I think there's one more thing I'll say around skills. This is very tactical, but I think carbon accounting and tracking is a really crucial skill, and understanding what goes into a life cycle analysis. How do you read a life cycle analysis for a building? What things drive, the overall carbon footprint of a building up and down, and where is embodied carbon most heavily concentrated? And just understanding how and where carbon is in the life of a building, I think is just a very basic thing that we can educate folks on when we're working on that inside of Turner, but just to create wider awareness.
Yeah, great points, Julie, because two of them really jump out at me. First of all, I'm remembering exactly the panel that you're speaking about. So the very first panel, actually, the design panel, where they were exploring how to design carbon-free buildings, one of our speakers commented about, we need more chief sustainability officers in the industry, right? And so since then, actually, an interesting article came out via Forbes, and there's a Forbes Ignite series, and the title of the piece is called The Rise of the Chief Sustainability Officer, right? So we are talking about officer level representation that is enabled to communicate with officer board level stakeholders as well as operational stakeholders to really kind of advance on some of these goals. And the complement to that, when you were saying about carbon accounting, I think what's really important too is helping this audience understand, first of all, that when we're talking about carbon, what I love about this topic is that if you have ever lived in New York City or a very congested city like that, if you've ever run your finger on the windowsills or anywhere near the outdoors of buildings, you'll have a very black finger. So soot is a very easy to kind of understand particulate, contaminant that can also have residency in the environment. But when we're talking about carbon accounting, we're also talking about the gallons or the liters of fuel that went into the equipment and the kilowatt hours that were used for the many hours of electricity that you're going to be consuming inside of offices, homes, and buildings. So some people are really adept at conversion calculations on Excel or other platforms out there, but we also need those folks to export those translations into practical, processes for the operators of those equipments or of those buildings, right? So coming back to Christy's comment related to the human operational and behavior change dynamic that needs to be a complement to this. And I really think those are exciting ideas too, because it really helps us to connect with all of the young workforce, millennial, zillennial, and whatever the other generation will be called too. We need to always be thinking about sort of cross-pollinating digital technology and mechanical technology so we have great problem solvers in this industry. So sorry, I wanted to make sure I said some of these passionate thoughts because you got me really inspired when you said those things. Now, over to you, Christy. When you think about jobs and skills and training, any ideas that come to mind?
Sure. Well, just as a really broad concept, to me, it's diversity. And kind of building on what Julia had said earlier around the construction industry is one of the least innovative industries that are out there. And there are a couple of reasons for that. You know, one, first of all, is, of course, the risk and impact of failure. It's much easier to build an app and have an app fail. It's going to be far less catastrophic than if a building fails. So, of course, that's an element. But another element to the lack of innovation could be the lack of diversity that has historically been part of the construction industry. Traditionally, it's been a bit more white male dominated. And I think bringing in different age groups, different genders, different perspectives will help to shape new ideas and encourage that innovation. And I think bringing sustainability to the forefront of that conversation will help to bring people with diverse backgrounds and perspectives into the industry. And I'm a prime example. I'm a female. I'm technically a millennial. If you look at the definition of millennial, I can just count myself as one. Thank you. And so I'm not a typical representative in the concrete industry. I've been in the concrete industry for almost a decade. And a decade ago, when I was thinking about joining Carbonfree, I have to share a story. I actually went in the interview and my CEO asked, "What do you know about concrete?" I said, I don't know. He said, "Well, what's the difference between concrete and cement?" And I kind of gave him a funny look. I was like, "Well, is there a difference?" I thought it was the same thing. It turns out very different. And I am now one of the biggest advocates for, understanding concrete sustainability. But the point is, I came into that because I was really interested in the mission of sustainability. I learned that what the impact was of cement, and as Jim mentioned, about 7% of the world's CO2 emissions, and realized there's such an opportunity to make a difference, to support this global challenge to decarbonize. And so that brought me into concrete, and now I am one of the biggest concrete lovers out there. I don't think I will ever leave this industry. And I hope there are more people like me that just come from different backgrounds, different ways of thinking that get involved in concrete construction.
Yeah. And I like your comments, especially Christy, but Julia, over to you. You were going to make a comment too.
I was just going to piggyback on that and say, with construction having this reputation of being, or the built environment having this reputation of being 40% of global emissions in any given year, that can be a turnoff for the next generation. But that wants to come into this industry, but if we say, hey, we have a bigger purpose, and it is to be build for the next generation, build for the future of this planet, that's a lot more attractive to get these next generation of thinkers into our industry who want to make a difference, who want to work for companies with purpose, and want to work for companies that are doing better instead of doing harm to the planet. So I think that's going to be as we talked about longevity of our industry and our companies, that's going to, showing this initiative and this leadership is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm. And Julia, I was wondering if you were going to speak at all to, the successes of the past month where we undertook a variety of discussions for Construction Inclusion Week. Any highlights that you think there can resonate with the comments that Christy also brought up?
Yeah, I would say a couple weeks ago, a team of contractors launched and initiated the first annual Construction Inclusion Week. And what was really impactful and what really resonated with me about that week, lots of great conversations about diversity in construction and in our industry, and the opportunities and the challenges there. But one of the things that resonated with me is when that many conversations are happening, there were 1,100 companies that participated in Inclusion Week. And that means there were at least 1,100 conversations, probably tens of thousands of conversations happening around diversity, equity, inclusion in our industry. We need that same scale, that same order of magnitude happening around sustainability solutions, how to impact the planet. So I I think that, I think that we're a better industry for talking about DE&I as much as we have in the last couple of years, and really bringing it to the forefront and not letting, the history of our industry, and not sweeping it under the rug, quite honestly.
Definitely. And just for a moment here, I wanted to also reflect on the fact that, Christy, you might be representing the youngest company in this group, but Lucas, you're representing one of the most historically tenured companies in this group. Lucas, would you take a moment to just help us appreciate the history of Saint-Gobain and perhaps how that company has had to think about not only expanding beyond its initial borders, but really also adopt local practices and worldwide as a component of local jobs and manufacturing. So wanted to have you share those thoughts with us here.
Sure. Hopefully I can in completeness. For those that don't know, Saint-Gobain is now a 355 or 56-year-old company. We were started by Louis XIV to create the mirrors for the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles. So it's a pretty good first job to get, and we've been sticking around ever since. This isn't our first pandemic. We're very fortunate to be with a company that has been through world wars, been through pandemics, has seen a lot of change in the world in 350 plus years. Over that time, the challenges and the stories have changed quite a bit. The company has grown through acquisitions and through organic growth worldwide. And acquisitions around the world introduce you to different types of constructions and different types of technologies. And you sometimes inherit a whole world of woe with that. There are ways things done around the world that are not done as well as we do in America. And so with that, you have a certain legacy you have to deal with. And then, as you're trying to take the best practices and best knowledge from around the world and spread that around the world, you face different levels of resistance as you try to make these changes take place. And in some cases, it's a dramatic shift in the way they build. Much of the world does not build light construction like we do, relatively light compared to how they would in South America or in parts of Europe and things like that. And so as we try to teach people about different ways of doing things, very often it's a major shift to take place. And it's the first time they've seen these issues or talked about them. But it's kind of neat to be at that edge, because it's kind of easier to have these conversations in the first world. It's a bigger challenge as you start getting down to lower developed areas of the world, less developed areas of the world, where this is not as much of a concern for them currently. Now, if you can rephrase the conversation, it becomes really interesting to them. If you take this conversation about embodied carbon and turn it into a conversation about global warming, boom, the lights go off in their head. They get that because they're being infected by global warming faster than we are in a lot of cases. And so then it becomes a very real conversation, and you can start trying to have those conversations under new terminology and new kinds of dialogues. But that is a unique challenge that we face as a company that has been around so long and has been trying so hard to take the acquisitions in other parts of the world and help bring them up to first world standards of manufacturing, health, safety, and occupant safety. So that's been a really unique challenge. It's one we struggle with still today. But it is also the land of the greatest opportunity, because if we can fix these problems in those countries as they grow, and before they get the really bad habits that some of us have already adopted in place, we can help them avoid that. It'll be much easier in the long run for them to not, have to undo things that they've done incorrectly. So it's, again, a chance of opportunity as well.
Yeah. And as I, think about your comments earlier, Lucas, I would add to the master mechanic, I would also add, we need a master translator, a master persuader. We need a master negotiator to really sort of like unlock some of those local practices that really are part of what you develop in the supply chain and in the value chain as well. So now I'm going to pivot over to Jim. And Jim, final thoughts that you may have just on this one topic, because there are so many interesting questions that are jumping in here. So I want to make sure that we kind of fold in some of these thoughts that you're going to share with us now. So Jim, when you think about jobs, skills, training, any of those words, what kind of ideas come up?
The intensity and power behind the topics that you've all discussed ahead of me is puts me in awe. So I'm going to take us down to a basic level. Building a concrete building, you still need skilled labor. we are finding it harder and harder to train, literally find people that are willing to take this on. So having diversity, creating new things, creating new materials, having different processes for us is a way for us to build excitement with a newer workforce. We still need the graybeards. We still need the people that have been here for 30, 40, 50 years to help us and share their experiences with us. As Lucas said, what works in Europe or South America or in California is not necessarily what works in Washington, D.C. metro area. So we have to explore different things. For instance, we have taken under a shotcrete operation in the last 3 years. It saves us from carpenters having to work on wall forms and vertical members of the buildings. So it uses less manpower, and it's a different, more efficient way to convey concrete to its final location. Things like that are what we have to explore, and we need to open Pandora's box across the board. Like I said, we've talked from the top of the organization to the craft workforce that is necessary to still build these buildings. We've got to train everybody and make sure we include them and show them that it's still fun to build a building. It's not taboo. It's okay to take this on. So we can't do things the same way. We have to change, and how we build things and how we go about our business has to change as well. And with that comes a little bit of excitement, and we'll bring some more resources on board with that excitement.
Yeah. And I think you also very well emphasized the fact that, we want to invite and continue to nurture the legacy workforce, the folks that have been around 30 to 40 years and all
Absolutely.
of these, apprentice, journeyman, and advanced kind of programs that exist today. We want to make sure we continue to nurture all of those aspects of the workforce. And I'm very passionate about that because I started, in the military and worked my way up. And I think there are a lot of pathways for folks to elevate their professions, even if they come up through the trades.
Absolutely.
So I think it's incumbent on all of our companies to also provide a variety of those kinds of opportunities to enable ladders of success to emerge from various, aspects of the workforce. All right. So with that said, because there's so many cool questions, I'm going to now pivot us to talking about some of these questions that have come through. For the benefit of the audience, I just want to say that most of the comments that you heard our speakers share today, they will be captured in key takeaways. So you'll be glad to be able to grab onto some of the sound bites that were shared today. So now I'm going to start with an interesting question. I mean, there's so many, but I'm going to just pick a few. Believe it, it's like my notes here are loaded with my messages. But let's start with one. What language can clients place in their bidding documents, RFP documents, etc., to require sustainable contractors? Is it requesting a sustainability plan enough, or setting lead and envision standards enough? What kind of language should they be looking at from the contract perspective? And this is open-ended, and whoever would like to speak, you can speak, jump in on each other's comments, or if it's more appropriate, we'll continue to the next question.
Can I start?
Yeah. Of course,
right.
Jim.
I think Christy you alluded to this a couple of times. The word I associate here is performance spec. So let's just take concrete. I'm most familiar with that. A performance spec that doesn't define a sustainability plan, but gives you targets toward those sustainability goals. However you get there is your choice. And that allows you to have investments and sometimes more reasonably financial ends to make the performance spec met. So, reduce embodied carbon in all of your concrete mixes by 35%. Well, that's a pretty lofty goal against the baseline that exists today. And that's a pretty simple spec clause that you could place in there. How you get there is okay. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to say that if I'm on a coast or I have alkalinity concerns, shrinkage, depending on the facility that's being built, there are other requirements that would have to be part of that spec, but you could put those targets in there and allow us as the contractor community with engagement from the design team, the ability to be flexible to achieve those goals.
Yeah, if I could add on to Jim, I would say figure out how to let those who are closest to the work bring ideas to the surface. So Jim knows a lot more about how to put sustainable concrete in place than I do, because this is what Jim does each and every day. This is your business, Jim. So However, we can figure out how to empower those that are putting the work in place to bring solutions to the table. There's a term in Lean called being at the Gemba, and that means those who are on the factory floor. It comes from the Toyota, right? The Toyota Lean initiative. So, however, we can either in the bid documents encourage, sustainable solutions to be part of, the bid that comes in, and then assess it, have it be, part of the selection criteria. What can that bidder bring to the table that I think we just need to not always assume we know the answer. Let's be open and let's see what comes in with just by asking the question. What can you offer? I'm trying to have a sustainable job. What can you offer? What can your firm provide?
And I'll build off of that statement as well, just to say something really simple and obvious, which is making the statement, reducing carbon is important to us, as forward as possible. You put it on your website if you're an owner, you put it in every document, put it in your email tagline, reducing carbon is important to us. And it's amazing how if people across the supply chain know that, they are going to come to the table with solutions. And they're going to feel empowered to suggest innovation. And so I can't stress it enough how simple it is.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah. I'll just echo Christy, is that when we see an RFP come in, and if we see the word carbon or sustainability 900 times in that RFP, well, we're going to talk about it. We're going to tell you what we can do and how we can help you. If it's not even mentioned in the RFP, well, we're going to talk about how we can improve your schedule and how lean we are. And we're going to talk about all these other things. And we're not going to tell you how good we are in sustainability because we don't see in the RFP how important it is to you. So Chrissy, 100%, talk about it, put it out there, say it's a priority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lucas, any words to jump in, or otherwise I've got a question teed up for you too.
No, I just love the idea of putting the onus back on the people who do it. The idea of giving Jim the opportunity to show you how he's going to do it on your job, giving him a target and letting him be creative and innovative about how he delivers the end product. Because there is a lot of creativity and innovation that's out there outside of our discussion we're having among us today. We want to bring them in every way we can. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm going to be carrying some of those thoughts forward too into this question. So I think this one's flavored for you or geared towards you, Lucas, but very open-ended, in fact, for all kinds of manufacturing conversations. So this one says, with respect to glass, a lot of jurisdictions no longer recycle glass. And so it is trash. So what can we do in the buildings industry to push jurisdictions or manufacturers to start recycling glass again?
I know it works today. I mean, in the places where it works really well where there's deposits on bottles, because it puts a value on the glass. Even though it's an artificial value, it's a value that people see and carry through all the way to the end. And another thing that works really well is if we make it as easy as possible for the glass to get back. So take back programs. In some places, it's putting at end consumer use places so the glass gets back in. Finding the ways to get it from the job sites and perhaps reuse it in a different way. There's a lot of issues with the glass and what's in the glass and what we're dealing with how we can use it. But there are sources of really good clean glass that we can get, and it's basically making it easier for end users to put it back into the system and not making it hard for them to find a way to get it back to us. And so sometimes it's containers on site. There's a whole variety of ways for being successful with it. But that's really where it's succeeding right now, where we have good rates of getting glass back, is where there's an artificial value because of a deposit, or where you've made it so easy for the end users to give it back to you, it's harder to get rid of it. And those are the two ways we've been succeeding as far as. And if anybody else has any more ideas, we'd love to push it.
Yeah,
Lucas,
and I agree with you. I think, first of all, there is an aspect of this that has to do with, let's say, superlative or exemplary waste management practices, right? During the demolition phase, there's some complexity to be able to separate just purely glass, depending on the volume of glass and the type of project that it is and the age of the building, et cetera. So in some ways, what's further important is to really think about that second layer of waste management, which is all the facilities that waste gets taken to. And as those facilities become adept at recycling both municipal solid waste and perhaps construction and demolition waste and focusing on glass or other inert materials. Really, what we also want to do is reward those facilities that properly and adequately recycle those materials. Those are the kinds of facilities that would be best suited to send back to manufacturers glass stock or other kinds of inert recyclable materials. So I think it's kind of a combination of targeting manufacturers that have robust take-back programs, telling those stories so that the market knows that those programs exist and that they're successful, and really also then looking at the local supply of recycling infrastructure and what those facilities are able to do to be able to carry and transport recyclable materials back to the manufacturers, because this isn't just like Shaw or Haworth carpet going back to the carpet manufacturers. Some of these other materials are dangerous to handle or heavy as well, and those things can create some additional complexities. Okay, now this is an interesting question for all of us to think about from a logistics perspective, but I think it's a little tailored to Julia first. So Julia, you brought up a great point about our domain as contractors on job sites and what we can control. What are some tactics you've started to use or see could have success in the industry to decarbonize construction sites?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm excited to answer it because there are lots of things that we can do now. So we've been tracking our energy use, fuel, water on Turner sites pretty extensively for about 2 years. And out of that data, this goes into data and technology and analytics and all that kind of stuff, we have learned a lot about where the most intensive uses of energy are during the construction process. And no surprise, it's all in fossil fuels, right? Actually, there's a lot in the commissioning into the building too, but mostly in fossil fuels, big site work happening. So short of us waiting, we've got a little ways before 5, 10, 15 years before the large engine construction equipment is going to be at a point where it can be hybridized or electrified completely. But there's equipment out there, and we're piloting on sites, and I think we have to show those manufacturers, the Matsus, the Caterpillars, the John Deere's, all of those, that there's interest, that we want them to go hybrid and electric with their equipment, and that there's a demand for it, because there's a cycle of, well, if there's no demand, I'm not going to put money into R&D, and it's a chicken or the egg. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of opportunity in smaller engine equipment. So think of the Gators and the UTVs that drive around your site. There's solar and electric, or solar and hybrid light towers that light up your site. LEDs. I mean, there's all sorts of things. There's hybrid generators, and like the 50 horsepower and below base that we can do, no questions asked, and we could do that tomorrow. I mean, you call up your Sunbelt Rentals and your United Rentals, and they can usually provide most of that stuff for you, no questions asked. So there are things we can do now, and there's things that we are starting to make more standard on Turner sites as we can. So we're trying to have conversations with some of these rental partners, with our subcontractors, and say, what could you guys do? What could we scale up now instead of wait? When we know we have to wait for the bigger equipment, and that's years down the road. But can we get some Ford Lightnings and start running around the site and show the demand for them? Those types of things.
Anyone else want to jump in on that question? And from your perspectives, anything that you are seeing that you have put into practice now that has been particularly successful or beginning to show promise in the spirit of reducing carbon?
I'll apologize for those non-concrete lovers out there, but that's the example I have. On the job sites, we produce our own concrete. We have taken our efforts to the next level. We recycle all our wash water. We do put some of it back into our concrete. So our water demand is 1,200 gallons less a week than it was if we hadn't recycled on just the Mets job. And we have a solar panel. It charges some of our radio batteries, and we've explored hybrid generators. Like Julia said, it's a just go do, and we have to just go do. Now, surprisingly, there is a large demand for this equipment, especially the larger generators, the hybrid generators. They're not easy to find right now, but you're right. You got to find the niche and go after it and hit, low-hanging fruits out there, especially from every aspect of the construction process. If we can do it when producing concrete, I'm sure it can happen in every facet of the manufacturing process too, as Lucas has mentioned in this panel as well. It's all out there. You just got to go find things to do. Recycling wood products as well. Put them through a shredder, offer the mulch to maybe not every consumer, but to people that could utilize mulch. We're doing that. So those are, and they create an excitement like we've talked about earlier. So that's out there. We got to just go do it and think about it to go do it.
Christy, what about for you? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I guess if I can make my suggestion on what contractors can do, particularly, it's to take leadership and ownership of carbon and sustainability on the project. One of the huge challenges is that there's so many stakeholders that are involved, and often that communication across the board is so hard to facilitate. I was just part of the roundtable in Kansas City where we had contractors and building product manufacturers and engineers and architects, all sitting around the table and talking about it. And it was pretty apparent that what was one of the challenges was just who's going to bring it forward to the table of, oh, I can provide a sustainability option. Are you interested in that? Or I am interested in sustainability. What can you bring to me? And so the contractor is often the central point for these various stakeholders. And even if there is sustainability is not written in the RFP, to still, pursue those options. If a contractor is asking building product manufacturers directly, what options do you have? What can you supply? You're probably going to be surprised by the answers, and it's going to at least, empower the producers and also show that there's demand for it. And going back to the owners and saying, hey, here are some options that you can do for to reduce your carbon footprint. It's not something that you said you wanted, but is it something you'll consider? And I just think that it just needs to be brought forward at the very forefront of the conversation in every project, and it has to be grassroots.
Well, I will share that, one of the multiple successes that Clark is starting to experience and enjoy on project sites, it picks up right where Julia was commenting relating to our fleet. So it turns out that there are alternatives to conventional diesel, which cause no mechanical damage or need for configurations or upgrades to the machinery. And this is called renewable diesel. It's a very finely refined type of diesel. The problem is that it's not available nationwide at the same price points that conventional diesel is offered. So in the state of California and in the state of Oregon, there are statewide subsidies for this type of fuel. But what it's helping to do is reduce 50 to 90% of the emissions that are associated with diesel combustion on project sites. So I think that there are ways where we can get started right now in some of this fuel transition and switch into lower combustion type of fuels. And there's other types of, let's call them equipment modifications. Turns out that idling is one of the most complex topics to address from a user perspective, but it's one of the largest culprits in a variety of what I would call fugitive emissions, that are being spent just because operators would like to keep cooler or warmer in their equipment. So a solution to that is taking a look at things like auxiliary power units or engine control modules. And these are technologies that are currently offered in new equipment, but also can be outfitted for existing legacy equipment that still has very high durable life, but perhaps after amortization, it's actually not worth very much to sell it in the marketplace. So from the equipment perspective, I'm super excited about the future for our industry, because more and more clean fuels are becoming available in the industry. And I think more and more high-performing vehicles are also coming to the industry beyond just passenger vehicles and light utility trucks. So it's the whole suite of vehicles that gets me excited, in addition to thinking about the operator and the transition for operators to use their equipment more effectively and efficiently. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left, and I think we're going to try to touch on one or two other questions, and I wanted to make sure I commented on this one. So kind of picks up on where you left off, Julia, but I want to make sure that Jim and Christy, especially as you factor into your companies. Christy, you're the leader of sustainability for your company, and Jim, you are as well. But I think this question is teed up really well for both of you also. So it says, as one person, a chief sustainability officer can only have so much of an impact on the sustainability practices of their companies. Do you have any ideas on ways to create change and increase interest on a company-wide level to enact change and be more sustainable?
Well, I think I'm pretty fortunate in that CarbonCure is a sustainability mission-based organization. And so my perspective might be different than perspective of others working in organizations whose key mission is not around sustainability, but it really does come from leadership at the top and embracement by the entire management team that sustainability is not only important from just a feel-good perspective, but it's important from a business perspective, from a bottom line, that there is a tangible benefit to implementing sustainability practices. Something that we've really done as an organization in the past couple of years has been to look across the board beyond just the deployment of technologies that improve the sustainability of concrete, but also look at the carbon footprint that we are generating in the process of doing so. We've invested in some very high quality carbon offsets that are permanent solutions to reduce carbon and supporting innovations. As a carbon offset provider, we understand how impactful that investment can be. And so it really does help for us to be able to say that we are a carbon neutral company and carbon curious. We are a carbon neutral company. We have tracked our emissions. We have offset our emissions with high quality investment. And I think that helps our brand. It helps our bottom line. And I think it's really important that organizations see that impact and embrace it.
So I can't say I'm as lucky as you, Christy, from being part of a sustainability company. Not that Miller & Long is not fantastic. We have a great company and a long legacy. However, we're builders, and we've always been builders. So it's a challenge to change course. And I'll say that the best way to do that is through our communication. So you can't do it alone. I don't do that alone. You have to champions, and you have to have successes, small victories. Like I mentioned in our plant sites, having those successes, they're infectious because people like to know they're doing well. And if the job site does well, if we have good performing concrete, there's good news from that. We can grow and increase that message from a sustainability perspective and build from that. And those create the building blocks that we translate into other areas. And that's how we do it little by little and have small victories that create larger successes.
Well, Jim, I know that, when I think about teams to execute some of this work, I'm really interested to see Lucas and Julia. Julia, you commented earlier that it was about less than 10 people, if I heard the number right. I'm curious as well, Lucas, when you think about the network of folks at Saint-Gobain that you work with and that you know about, like, how many people do you think are operating in that space in your company?
Wow. Hundreds around the world, dozens and dozens here in North America. But really, it goes way beyond that. And I'm going to try to segue. We're pulling that last question as well. Our factory floor is very different than your factory floor. But one of the ways we tried to take this all the way down to the factory floor is by trying to make it fun. I mean, can you make carbon fun? Yeah, there are still ways. Like, we took the whole energy waste water thing and flipped it on its head. We created the WWE. And so we give out belts every year to our factory workers who are the champion.
Like wrestling WWE.
Exactly. We actually had the real wrestling belts made up by the company that makes them. And we award those every year. Again, just trying to find a way to take these things that are other abstract or 10,000-foot concepts and make them real and fun and competitive for people to get into. And so that that requires education, but then suddenly become eager for the education. And because now they want to get into it. And so that's one of the things that we've tried to do to try to spread that from the dozens of people who have it as their full-time and try to make it a full-time thought for everyone, even though it's not their full-time.
Yeah. Julia, any gamification happening over at Turner? How do you leverage your group?
We do. So as I mentioned, we do this energy tracking at our job sites. we do get very competitive on that. The accountability, how is your project doing? How's that project tracking? You know, how much energy did you use this month? But I'll say I would be, the effort at Turner is a lot bigger than 10 people. The 10 people do it full time. We have a network of probably just like you, Lucas, 100 people that do it somehow, some way. They do it on the side because they're so passionate about it. I think it sounds cliche, but this is like a know your audience thing in the communication. It's like if I'm talking to management, I'm talking about sustainability as a differentiator. If I'm talking to the under 30 generation about sustainability, it's like, look at the scale of impact Turner can have by doing this, right? We have a sense of supply chain, and look how we can improve that 40% greenhouse gas emissions and all of that. So my message is very different in what drives people, and it's like understanding that. It's a communication marketing 101. I'm trying to think how else we gamify though. Lucas, you're dead on. You got to make it fun. That's true about all the work, but I think how else we do it.
Well, I know that at Clark, we also have something, Julia, that probably your company does have as well. And we support an employee resource group. It's our sustainability steering committee. Many of those folks are here today watching our presentation. And so we just have a very active core, CORPS, like a group of people across Clark that sometimes are not even actually managing the on-the-ground sustainability efforts for that project certification or processes. They're just participating because it's in their passion, it's in some aspect of their professional development and career goals too. And so we have folks in all kinds of places, HR, finance, as well as all of our active project sites. And I think giving people opportunities to explore, experiment, and push the company, toward greater and more ambitious goals. Like, they propagate a lot of conversations at their levels and with their teammates that I'm not able to have. And so I think it's important to create a lot of channels and vessels for our employees to make sure that they feel that they are engaging in impacting the company's bottom line, as well as advancing their project's goals. And it makes them, at least I believe, it gives them an opportunity to feel more fulfilled with their careers. And that's an important part of what I think we need to translate both through gamification as well as, cost benefit analyses and speak like you're saying, Julie, know to your audience to be able to really address the bottom line benefits to whoever the stakeholders are. So with that, any final comments from the speakers as we get ready to conclude our program for today? Okay, well, hearing none, I know that you are likely to hear from many of our attendees in the future via LinkedIn or certainly through any other communications that they might be able to reach you at. So for now, I'd like to invite everybody to say goodbye, and I would just want to thank you so much, speakers, for the opportunity to talk together today to help us learn about what it's going to take to, construct carbon-free buildings. And so, bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then I will invite Teresa to come back and join me for a last round of closing remarks. Hey, Teresa.
Hello. Thank you. I have to say that was an exciting and insightful conversation. I think, the perspectives that we heard on our call today, on our panel today, really, brought this panel series to a strong close. I think it put a really nice end cap on the bigger question of what will it take, and really how we can work together to achieve these lofty but very important collective goals. So I'd like to thank you and thank the panelists and thank the audience members for your engagement. We had some great engagement and great questions on the panel today. And thank you to those of you who have also stuck with us throughout all 4 of these panels. I hope you found it very useful, and I'm sure you're starting to see some of the same themes that we've identified and will be identifying in our event takeaways after this event. So keep an eye open for, the event summary and recordings, and then Clark and the Hub are working together on some interesting series takeaways. So keep an eye open for that too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will just echo your thoughts to the rest of the attendees with us today, and for also the legacy of the archive of these recordings. Many of you who are returning to us today to hear this final panel already know that the Building Innovation Hub has hosted and will archive and curate perpetually the takeaways from all of these 4 panels, plus the live recording that has been archived onto their website. And so I know that this content will have enduring value. Next year, we're likely to talk so much more about all of these different points of view. And especially, I think we will be hearing more about how these 4 different sector perspectives need to work collectively together from the beginning to really enable to move the market, move industry, and really unlock the benefits of economic scales and other types of cost savings that could be accomplished when we're just able to properly supply and demand the market with carbon-free, carbon-neutral buildings. And so with that, I'd like to say my final thoughts and just express gratitude for having been your co-host and moderator of today's discussion. And I look forward to a lot more engagement on this topic in the years ahead. With that, thank you so much.